It's another edition of WRAL Triangle and 2. I'm Mark Bergin. He's Pat Welter. And Pat, it's been quite a week and quite an experience since we've last talked. I want to start today's conversation with this. Do you get any sense that Bill Belichick's job is contingent on the outcome of Friday's game against Cal?
I would say no. But that's not to mean that if this game is an absolute abject disaster, that could change, right? I mean, we saw last year there was James Madison, and then there was Boston College, and that's when Bubba Cunningham steps in and basically comes to the conclusion that it's time to move forward. Now, this decision, a little more complicated. I think the clock was already out on Mac. He'd already been there several years. He'd already kind of passed how long they thought he was initially going to be there when they brought him back for a second time. Now, with Bill Belichick, we're talking about 5 games in to this massive investment. So everything I've heard from decision makers behind the scenes at UNC is, let's get this thing back on track. Let's be patient. Let's support them. Let's look into everything that we've reported and others have reported. And to UNC's credit, they have. They've worked with me on this process. They've worked with us on this process. So no, I don't think that the outcome of Friday's game is like, it's got to be a win and it keeps his job. But at this point, anything is on the table going forward. I think ideally they'd love to bring him back for another year. They'd love to get the thing back on track and have some positive momentum going to next year. But if I'm a betting man, I don't know that momentum is ever going to happen, but it's sports. Crazier things have happened.
So here's what I don't understand, Pat, is when Belichick spoke this week to address your reporting, some of the other reports that are out there, he keeps pointing to the improvements that he's seen from the Tar Heels since the spring. How are the Tar Heels even measuring that? And let me say, before you answer that, they have the 131st ranked offense in all of college football. If you go to NCAA.com, there's only 134 college football teams that are ranked, and they are ranked 131 when it comes to total offense. So how are they measuring that when he says this team has made improvements since spring ball?
I think the improvement he's referring to is quite literally like their side strength speed, because that is the only thing I've been pointed to, talking to sources, that has been really the positive of the Bill Belichick era, that these players are physically bigger, faster, stronger than when they got here. And that's going for the Mac Brown era recruits and the Bill Belichick era ones. Because I agree with you, when you're talking about on the field, like Freddie Kitchens took the microphone today, Wednesday, and he said the offense has improved if you look back to TCU. Well, it maybe improved against Richmond. It did not against Clemson. It was stuck in neutral against Charlotte. So I don't know what they're referring to. It's kind of like you're being gaslit a little bit in these press conferences where Belichick, his staff, the players are going up there this week and basically telling you that everything's fine, when I know it's not fine behind the scenes, and everybody knows it has not been fine on the field.
So we're recording this on Wednesday in advance of Friday's game, Pat, and a lot of the assistant coaches spoke today along with a few of the players. What did you learn during the availability today?
Yeah, I think it was interesting to see kind of where they stuck to their talking points, where you could maybe see a nestle of the actual truth, maybe beyond that. And, I thought that Steve Belichick loosely confirmed that there has been some frustration. And I think it's obvious for any team in this situation for there to be frustration. A frustrated team that's losing is not necessarily a headline. But he said that he appreciated the passion of the guys, that means that they care. But I think what you didn't see was necessarily them being willing to change their approach. And I think going back to Monday, I asked Bill Belichick, after he was sticking to his talking points initially in the press conference, I said, so you're telling me you think this process is working? And he said, yes, it's a learning curve, but it's worked everywhere he's been. It's going to work here. And so that's where there's a little bit of an unwillingness to change the approach, at least on the coaching side of things. Nobody has gotten fired. We have a cornerbacks coach that's been suspended only at the behest of our reporting, which was in light of the extra benefits allegations that were being divvied out with as far as like tickets and sideline passes. But as far as like coaches being fired, play calling being changed, offensively, defensively, we've got none of that.
That was where I was going to go next. You look at the statistical rankings, and the defense hasn't been great either. I know you go to complementary football a lot of times, but again, I look at the total offense relative to all the other teams in college football. There's got to be some improvement there. I also look at this from the standpoint, Pat, of okay, if you fire Belichick, he's owed that full $30 million guaranteed in total, so there's still $20 million and some change on that. If you were to fire him without cause, and if you were to fire him with cause, totally different conversation. And if Belichick wanted to buy out his own contract, he'd owe the university $1 million. You look across college football, and Penn State firing James Franklin, and I know that the headlines generate, we say, roughly $50 million. That is also, I want to add the caveat on there of he has to try to find employment. He has to try to find another coaching job or a media gig, and then Penn State ends up paying the difference. But I look at that of Penn State's willing to fork over the money, and we've talked about this, Pat, of, if the university were serious about firing Belichick, the amount of money that they would need to spend to pay out his contract guarantees, which also don't include his general manager, Mike Lombardi, his coaching staff either. But I look at Penn State, and it's like, well, Penn State has done it. Would UNC consider this? I do think that we need to see improvement, and they've had, the bye week in advance of the Clemson game, the bye week after the Clemson game. You go on the road against Cal, and this game opened with Cal as a 12.5-point favorite. It's down to 10.5, but Cal's still favored in this game, going in at 4-2. UNC is 2-3. I thought it was very telling earlier this week that a lot of the conversations had to do with the reporting around the locker room, around the team. Like, the conversations aren't about, okay, is Max Johnson your starting quarterback over Gio Lopez anymore?
Nobody even asked that today. You know what I mean? Like, in all honesty, though, who plays quarterback on Friday, to me, does feel a little bit inconsequential because the offensive problems are so much deeper than Gio Lopez, Max Johnson. Like we saw, It didn't really look wholly different versus Clemson, regardless of who it is. So I think if they're going to sit here and tell us all week long that they're improving, that things are fine in the locker room. Now, players today, CJ Mims was one of the players that spoke, Benjamin Hall, the other one. So you got one from offense, one from defense. And they did acknowledge that the players have talked about this. They've addressed some of the noise. There wasn't necessarily a quote-unquote players-only meeting. Now, as far as like the kind of talking point, at least as far as the locker room divide or the divide among the Mac Brown versus the Bill Belichick era recruits, which was a big part of my piece, they kind of said that we view ourselves as one team. And that's what you should say. That's what you should be, right? But if everything's fine and you are really improving, we need to see it on the football field, because 120-33 as your point differential in Power 4 games, that alone is enough to fire this coach, let alone all the unnamed sources that we've uncovered.
And let me point out, Pat, all of those teams, TCU, UCF, Clemson, respectable programs, none of them were ranked. I'm going to keep saying this. None of them were ranked when you lost to each of those teams. Was there anything that surprised you today other than being united on a front where it's like this is kind of counteracts a lot of the reporting, dude? Was there anything that really surprised you specifically from today?
Not really.
All right. Here's where I'll go then, Pat, because I've been thinking about this. With Belichick of what's going on, what's his future at the university? NC State's on a bye week as well right now, and we've talked about Duke as well. Duke off to a 4-2 start, 3-0 in the ACC. I'm not saying that we're going to have 3 coaching vacancies here in the Triangle, but if I can't look you, I'd be surprised if there's not at least one. I'd be surprised if there's not at least one of UNC saying the Belichick thing did not work. At what point? I don't know, whether it would be mid-season, after the season. Dave Doeren, if NC State wants to pay his buyouts $12.5 million after this season, they're 4-3 right now. And then if another program, when we open up the coaching carousel, Penn State's open right now. The rumor right now is that Matt Rule from Nebraska would jump to Penn State. Penn State could also look at Manny Diaz, who used to be the defensive coordinator there. That starts a cycle in motion. The Florida job with Billy Napier, that could open up as a vacancy. I think we're in for an absolutely crazy coaching carousel this year. I really do. I think it's going to be absolutely nuts. So then you have to ask yourself, if you are NC State, do you really want to get rid of Dave Doeren? If you are UNC, how can you try to make this work? How can you salvage things with Belichick right now? Whether it's with bringing in new recruits, whether it's making some changes to your coaching staff. But I will say this too. I'm not saying you're going to have all three coaching vacancies in the triangle, but I would be surprised if there's not at least one. That's how I'm looking at all of this as we see how the coming weeks shake out.
I'm preparing for it mentally, my friend, because last week was insane. And now I'm prepared for anything going forward, right? Like if this game goes really bad on Friday for UNC at Cal, and I know I'm looking into other things, other leads that I haven't fully been able to confirm to be able to report that could add potentially to the case against Belichick. I'm sure every national reporter and every local reporter here is doing their digging as well. So who's to say more doesn't come out about this program in addition to what has been unacceptable on the football field? And then I start to wonder with UNC, I understand the standpoint of patience is the path 5 games in, but how are you going to get this back on track in the transfer portal era? How are you going to get the full buy-in of this team when it's been this bad and there's been such a miscalculation as far as implementing the NFL structure, right? As my alarm goes off here.
Well, that's
probably to pray like I'm Hubert Davis because I've needed some prayers the last week.
That's another point about the NFL, though. Belichick's experience was in the NFL prior to college. We know at least the Tennessee Titans now have an interim head coach after firing Callahan. So is there any movement between college, pro to college as well? So to add, icing on that is, if you will, you have the NFL to worry about as well in terms of the coaching vacancies. But in terms of college football, again, Penn State opened up right now. That's a huge vacancy.
The top dog.
So, and I'm looking at, could it be Kirk Cignetti from Indiana? But that starts the chain reaction, Pat, of how all of this plays out. And if you're a triangle team, you're going to be competing against the likes of a Penn State, potentially against the likes of a Florida. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out, but that's something else to keep in mind where, okay, you want to get the best coaching candidate in there if you want someone else in to change the fortunes, whether it's the Tar Heels or the Wolfpack. You've got to keep in mind you're going to be competing against some elite-level programs across the country. So that's something else to keep in mind where it's, well, if Penn State can fire James Franklin, if you're a UNC fan, you want Belichick out of here. You've got to be able to understand the context of that, of what that means, of if you want to pay tens of millions of dollars for buyout, and then you have to then go spend even more money to bring in a coach to get things right. It's not going to be an easy fix. It's not going to be an easy fix if that's the path you want to go down.
Well, I'd say this. Here's where UNC is at least positioned. If they choose to move on from Bill Belichick, they have the advantage of, well, there's a whole list of people that Bubba Cunningham wanted this time last year before the hiring process kind of got taken over by John Pryor, the trustees, and the chancellor ultimately making the final decision. So Bubba Cunningham's got a list. We've got John Summerall, who went back to Tulane. Now, would he come here after the way things played out last year? I would probably bet against no. But I know that Tommy Rees was a strong candidate for Bubba, and it's my understanding that if they were to do a search, that it would be kind of a tag team effort between Cunningham and Steve Newmark, who's the new athletic director in waiting, who's going to fully take over next summer. So he's already got that list ready to go. I imagine there might be some frustration behind the scenes, or maybe some sled I told you so at how this has played out if they do decide to move on. I'm not saying that Bubba's saying that, but that would be a human reaction. So there's that. And then if you're NC State, and if you believe the reports that Dave Doeren was trying to get out last year, was trying to step away, that I know Joe Giglio is really strong on that, and he's tied in, so I take him at his word there. So then maybe Boo Corrigan has been preparing for this moment too, And kind of like, I think NC State is similar to Penn State in that things have run their course with James Franklin. Like, in a vacuum, you're firing a guy that was in the playoff last year. That seems crazy for losing 3 games in a row.
It does, but then when you lose your 3rd straight game as a 3-touchdown favorite against Northwestern's the team you can't lose to in the Big Ten, Pat. So I hear what you're saying. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail your point,
fine.
But yeah, it's for a team that had national championship aspirations going into this year and where they are now with the fired coach, with the quarterback with the season-ending injury. That's a very proud institution that wants to get over the top and beat the Ohio States of the world, that want to beat the Michigans of the world and not just win the Big Ten, but win the national title. So that's what you're going to be competing against when – and look, I do want to say this too, because I talked to Brian Murphy about this. Mm-hmm. You see the $50+ million of the buyout for Franklin. Again, that's contingent upon that he has to actively try to find employment as another coach or in the media world. If the UNC job or NC State job, is that a possibility? I mean, it's once this coaching carousel gets fully underway, it's going to be crazy, Pat. It's going to be crazy.
They say the grass is always greener, and sometimes you just want somebody else's like slightly past due grass. You know what I mean? Overgrown grass, brown grass. And that's James Franklin, where like Penn State can't wait to get rid of this guy. I covered Penn State from 2014 to 2018. Now, in that time, I really enjoyed covering him because I thought he did a great job, helping get that team out of the shadow of the Jerry Sandusky scandal. Now, this is after Bill O'Brien, but still, it was looming. It was in the background of almost everything there. Saquon Barkley, Trace McSorley get a ton of credit for that. But then what happened with Penn State is they just never seemed to win the big game. Like when I was there, they beat Ohio State, which helped catapult them, to the Rose Bowl, and you could argue in another world, the college football playoff as a 2-loss team. But what's continually happened really since that is they've struggled to develop quarterbacks, they've struggled to win the big games, and after they lose to Oregon and things just completely tank after that, they're probably like, all right, let's not even let him turn the season around. We know what we want to do. He's not getting us there. But if you're UNC or NC State, that's exactly what you want. Is the guy that can get you at least into your conference title conversation every year. Are they going to beat, the top 10 team? No, but they're going to compete. They're going to beat every team that they shouldn't, or every team that they should, and, get you in the 9-10 win race every year. I mean, James Franklin is a proven winner. The floor is high. And you're talking about UNC after you've seen the floor completely fall out.
Yeah, just bottom out.
That's what you want. You don't want to be taking a big risk here. So James Franklin is the kind of guy that could come in with energy, excitement, and a really high floor. And, I mean, what more could you ask for?
I think there's going to be other programs where he is sought after, though, as well. So that's something else to keep in mind. How does this play out? Like, what do you need to see from UNC Friday? But, I mean, I'm looking at the schedule. You get at Cal. Your only other ranked opponent right now is Virginia. Halloween at Syracuse, Stanford, Wake, Duke, NC State for the Tar Heels. Let's start here. What do you need to see Friday from UNC?
I mean, I'd start with just the body language, and that's what stood out to me massively in the Clemson game. Zero juice on the sidelines. After Clemson touchdowns, slumped shoulders from the defensive backs. Just really go back to the communication issues. Like, you watch their sidelines. Like, I'm hearing about what's going on at practice and the poor communication, the poor relationship development between the players and coaches. Well, you see that on the sidelines at these UNC games. So are we going to see a team that, if they're telling us they've talked about the noise, the media, are they rallying around it? Well, can we see that in the game? Can we see an inspired performance? Do we see a team that's playing for their coach, and if not playing for their coach, playing for their own NFL film and transfer portal tape? At a minimum, I would like to see some inspired play. I'd like to see you not commit a penalty on your first offensive snap. I'd like to see you come out at halftime with some actual adjustments. I'd like to see some offense beyond your first scripted drive. Like, if you're going to say we're improved, we need to see it. So I don't even necessarily need to see them win the game. I need to see them compete in a game. Like, that's the starting point. And if you don't see that again, then I think if you're a UNC decision maker, maybe you don't fire him next week, but you've got to be really looking into it.
I look at Caleb Hood retiring as a fifth-year senior, the player who scored the very first touchdown of the Bill Belichick era, what might be the highlight. It is, at least to this point. At least to this point it is. And then the social media post that he and Bubba Cunningham put out midweek, where if you just saw that post without any other context going on, it was on a Wednesday night. It was like
10 o'clock.
What is the purpose of this? And it was like, so once I saw that, Pat, it was like, because I know that we've used a lot of anonymous sources for fear of retribution. And I understand that you don't want to have to face consequences for being able to speak truth of what is going on right now. And when I'm talking about the sources here, but the fact that they addressed it in just such a blanket statement, it was just like, where there's smoke, there's fire, Pat. That's just how I feel with all of this. And so Cal's your next opportunity to try to get things right. And again, Cal is a 4-2 team, also not ranked, a 10.5-point favorite where, you have a 10:30 Eastern time kickoff. So
at least this time, nobody's going to see it if it's really bad.
Well, it's on ESPN. So we'll see. But man, it's what a week it's been. And Pat, you're reporting. I'd recommend anyone listening to this or watching this, check out Pat's coverage on WRALSportsFan.com. Anything else when it comes to the Tar Heels? I'll briefly preview Duke before we get out of here, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, I guess since you brought up the statement, I did get some background on just like why that came out so late, why it was the way that it was. And the way it was explained to me was it came out so late because there was just a lot going on that day, a lot they've had to sort through, a lot they've had to talk to get to that point. The exit strategies report comes out. And I'm not trying to discredit that reporter or that report. All I know is that what I was told, and basically everyone was told around the country after that from high-level UNC people that would know, is that that wasn't true. They were vehement about it. Does that mean that that is the 100% truth? Like, I don't know. Was I in that room? What truly constitutes an exit strategy conversation? So I caveat it with that, but I could tell you that that's what I was told, that the exit strategy stuff was not true, that Bell wasn't trying to do his own buyout, and that was the first thing he addressed in the press conference. That statement was in direct response to that, to kind of quell those rumors, because our reports were stuff that they were looking into, issues within the team, specific incidences. When you're talking about basically UNC's going to fire this guy, they felt like they had to put out a statement to that. So again, they're standing by him for now. So that's kind of the story there. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone's just kind of taking it all in, man. I think they're all processing this in real time. Basically all we have so far is a suspended coach in Armand Hawkins. We've potential recruiting violations.
Do we know when he'll be due back?
Yeah, they didn't say. They're still looking into it, but they didn't really elaborate on what's going on there. But we know he's suspended for the time being.
Very quickly, we'll wrap here. Duke taking on Georgia Tech, noon, Wallace Wade Stadium. It's battle of the running game, so Blue Devils have to stop Haynes King. He's the former Texas A&M quarterback. Leads the team in carries and rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. He's got 9 of those. He's almost like, Pat, I saw Georgia Tech play Wake Forest earlier this season. He's like the homeless man's Tim Tebow, except he's right-handed. That style of play, but the Yellow Jackets, 19 rushing touchdowns, 238 yards on the ground this season. That's 12th most in the country. Duke has a pretty solid running game, too. Nate Shepard, Anderson Castle as well. So we focus on the quarterbacks a lot of times. To me, which team can control time of possession, control the football. I think this is going to be a very physical football game, but Duke has its toughest test to this point, even more so than Illinois, because Georgia Tech is undefeated coming into this one as well.
Yeah, well, the thing with Georgia Tech is they're really good as an underdog. Are they the favorite in this game?
I don't have those odds in front of me, full disclosure.
Yeah, I haven't either, because I've been living in this Belichick world. I'd be interested what that line is. My guess would probably be Georgia Tech -4, something like that, -2.5, like a short road favorite. I guess the point there is like they're really good in that underdog spot. How good are they really as a road favorite now? Like Brent Key, talking about coaches. I mean, this guy is building a program. I remember when he first started down there, people would point to UNC losing to them as this big black eye for Mac Brown. Well, that team is legitimate. You find the line?
Yeah, Duke -1.5. So Duke is the favorite. At least that's how it opened. So odds can obviously change.
That still thinks that Vegas thinks that Tech is the better team without the home field advantage in there. But yeah, man, Duke's been on a roll. Where like they had that turnover issue earlier in the season. Really, ever since they figured that out, the real Darian Mensah has stood up.
Yeah,
he is balling. He is so smooth. The emergence of Nate Shepherd. I mean, the way they just flew through Syracuse and Cal at times was really impressive to me. I've been wanting to put them in my top 25 with 2 losses. Can't quite get it there, but I believe they're a top 25 team. So this is going to be really an interesting spot.
Yeah, it's an undefeated team. Pat, anything else before we sign off here with all of your reporting that you've done with Belichick? Because, listen, I got to give my guy a shout out. He's on the Dan Patrick Show. He's on NBC. I mean, you did a lot of interviews with your reporting this last week. But if you've somehow missed this, if you've been in a cave and under a rock, you can go to the WRAL YouTube page. A lot of the footage exists there if you want to see information about Pat's reporting. But Pat, fill in the blanks. What am I missing?
Yeah, no, I appreciate those shout outs. And yeah, this has been a craziest week of my life, essentially. Never thought it would become this. I knew when Belichick got hired that we had the opportunity to cover something that the whole country would care about. And we have seen that from his hiring to Jordan Hudson saga and now to the locker room drama. Win or lose, people are fascinated by this man who doesn't seem to speak, but in the absence of his words, people fill in the blanks. And, I've always got stories, right? Stories behind the scenes. Okay. And they tend to be my late night road ventures. And, we go to ACC Tipoff. So we break the story last Monday.
Yes, so this was in Charlotte, and you're trying to cover basketball, then all of the Belichick stuff just breaks loose. Over. Yes.
And by the end of the week in Charlotte, I wasn't even going to the basketball press conferences anymore. I'm just like on my phone 24/7. I remember at one point I'm on the phone with a source in a empty stairwell in the hotel, just trying to find a private moment to get information. But the funniest thing that kind of happened of all of it was driving back at night, right? So it's been crazy 3 days, barely any sleep. I probably should have stayed in a hotel one more night, but I had so much adrenaline, like I'm just going to drive 2.5 hours back. I neglect the fact that I have no gas.
Oh, no.
So I'm on the highway. No. I'm like, man, I'm so exhausted. I'm borderline hallucinating from, just nonstop crazy work, adrenaline, being thrust into this national story. And I'm like, all right, get your head on straight. Don't push it with the gas. Stop at the next station. I am not making this up. The next station available to me was Bill's truck stop.
I saw this. Okay, I saw this. I wasn't sure where you were going, but on your Instagram, that was the name of the gas station.
Bill's truck stop. So for people who don't know, if you're driving between Raleigh and Charlotte, you've probably seen this. It's this like kind of large, basically like a low-key Buc-ee's kind of spot where like truckers can park and sleep, take a shower, but it is very Waffle House energy when you walk in. It is not a high-end place, I'll say that. A lot of character. So to walk in there for that to be the spot, I mean, I felt like I've been living in a movie the last week, and at that point, I was like, well, I'm in one, clearly.
It's an omen, there's a higher being, it's fate.
Was this all a dream? Like, what is happening right now? So you can't make this stuff up, man.
Well, shout out to Bill's truck stop.
I should have
very fitting. It's very, very fitting. He is the one and only Pat Welter. I'm Mark Bergin. Thanks for listening to WRAL Triangle 2 on the WRAL YouTube page. If you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be back next week recapping everything that you need to know from this weekend's action. Check out Brian Murphy's conversation with Bryn Renner, the former UNC quarterback as well. Enjoy this weekend's action, and we'll talk to you next week. Until then, take care and so long, everybody.